Hello everyone, and by everyone I don't mean the people that hated this game because Chloe's not in it. You're probably not going to like this review. To everyone that doesn't fit that description, however, welcome in. Thanks for watching. It's been about a week since I finished the game, so I've had a bit of time to get my thoughts together for this review. Overall, I thought this was a pretty good game. I definitely liked more things than I disliked, but there were a few aspects I wasn't too hot on. Let's start with what I liked. So first up, the characters. Most of the characters in this game were excellent. I felt like they all had well-developed personalities and everyone felt very distinct. Most of the characters were pretty likable and made me care about them in a short amount of time. Special mention to Moses and Amanda, who are sweet little cinnamon rolls that must be protected at all costs. I also liked that even the assholes had shades of gray to them. I was a bit off-put by Vin's LinkedIn bro persona and skeevy attempts at flirting. But by the end, I understood why he acts the way he does, and he mostly redeemed himself in my eyes. I felt much less sympathy for Lucas by the end, as his treatment of Maya was absolutely deplorable, but I did feel bad that his son also paid the price for it. I could also understand how Lucas's poor life choices were fueled by an inferiority complex he developed growing up with a famous father. The entire voice cast absolutely nailed it. All the actors really brought out the personalities of the characters. I need to give special recognition to Max and Hannah Tell, as I think her character was handled beautifully. It was so nice just to hear Max's voice again, and I found myself with a stupid grin on my face just seeing her be happy after everything she went through. I think her character growth was also demonstrated very well. 10 years on, I was expecting a more mature, self-assured Max. A Max that has come to grips with the burden of her powers and the responsibility that comes with it. A Max that is still haunted by her past, yet still has enough hope to not let it consume her. And that's exactly what I got. Moving on, the setting. Caledon was great, and setting the game in winter was a perfect choice. It made for stunningly beautiful landscapes while still being able to shift into like an unsettling, creepy vibe when necessary. Setting the game in a small liberal arts college was a good choice as well, because it retained the intimate feel of Arcadia Bay while still feeling diverse. It also gave Max a believable reason to be there, with enough realistic existing relationship dynamics to pick up and media res. Another big improvement was the dialogue. Before I played Double Exposure, I did a rewatch of the Arcadia Bay games as a refresher, and the most striking thing I noticed was how much better the dialogue writing was than the original Life is Strange. Most noticeably, the dialogue isn't cringy as hell in Double Exposure. Whenever I recommend the original Life is Strange to people, I have to add a disclosure about how awkward the dialogue is, so that I personally don't feel so embarrassed about how much I love the first game. Double Exposure, on the other hand, actually felt like watching real people talk to each other and develop relationships that felt relatable, so much needed improvement there. The mechanics. I like that they changed things up for this game. Time powers would have felt like a rehash, and the timeline hopping was a good expansion of Max's powers. I felt like they fit in line with fan theories about Max's multiverse abilities and made for interesting story implications. While the game only flirted with the multiverse and its implications in this installment, I do hope that in future games they'll expand upon this. Another major improvement was the graphics. Coming fresh off an original Life is Strange rewatch, the transition to Double Exposure was absolutely jarring. This game is beautiful, and utilizing full mocap animation is a much needed improvement over the originals. This is especially true when it comes to facial expressions, as unlike the original Life is Strange, I found myself focusing more on the characters than I did on the subtitles, which is a good thing. And finally, this soundtrack. I absolutely love this soundtrack, and it's exactly what I would expect from a Life is Strange game. It's a nice balance of chill with a little melancholy and dread sprinkled in for texture. I've been listening to it on repeat on Spotify since like episode 2 or 3, and I'm definitely going to keep it in rotation for a good while to come. Alright, moving on to the things I thought were just okay. The most obvious one being the plot. So, I felt like the game did a good job tying Max's past to her future. The mysteries were interesting and kept me hooked. Waiting a week between episodes really did kill me. That said, the stakes did feel a bit low, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Higher stakes could have come off as trying too hard, so it's a tough choice and difficult to say which is the right one. The main thing I wasn't too keen on was the climax. I get Safi is pretty unstable and gives Alex Chen a run for her money when it comes to keeping her emotions under control, But even with that characterization, it's a bit hard to see why she went nuclear after finding out it was Yasmin who forced Gwen to kill the book deal. The first reason is a bit meta. If the book truly is that good, I'm sure she could have found another publisher, right? So could have easily avoided the whole situation. More thematically, though, the story told us that Yasmin covered up Lucas's plagiarism to protect the university's reputation, which ultimately led to Maya's suicide. And Safi knew about this. Yet she managed to patch up her relationship with her mother anyway. Knowing this, killing a book deal seems pretty tame in comparison, and Safi having such an extreme reaction to this felt a bit hollow. I realized the writers were going for a straw that broke the camel's back kind of situation, but it just didn't work for me. And because a sequel is planned, the ending didn't feel very conclusive. I won't be able to make a final judgment on the plot until I see the whole story unfold, but as for this game, it left me kind of meh. I also know some people took issue with how the storm was used in this game, and how Max seemed to get off scot-free by not killing Safi. Caledon was a little battered, but mostly fine, and nobody died. Max went on and on about how there's always a price to pay for using her powers, so what is this bullshit, right? After sitting with this a bit, I'm actually okay with it. Not because I want a kumbaya happy ending, but because I think Max weathered one storm just to unleash another, and that storm is Safi. The ending made it pretty clear that Safi was bitter over her life, sick of feeling helpless, cowing to what Yasmin thought was best, and she started to make a heel turn into thinking she was better than everyone because she had powers. A god among mortals. It seems pretty clear that Safi's time spent away from Caledon will only calcify these feelings, and she'll become the villain of the next game, which I'm sure will end badly to pay the karmic toll. Alright, next thing I thought was just kind of meh was the puzzles. The timeline hopping had really good potential for creating interesting puzzles. I wish the ability to shift objects between realities came into play for puzzle solving, not just narrative beats. And even with hints turned off, the puzzles still felt a bit too hand-holdy. I would have liked to see more complexity in the puzzles, but I also realize I am a sucker for puzzles, so I can understand not wanting to make the puzzles too difficult when they're not the main focus of the game. And then romance options. So Amanda was amazing, no notes there, absolutely loved it. She was effortlessly charming in a way that really clicked with Max's personality. The game would have absolutely destroyed me if anything bad had happened to her, which I'm simultaneously overjoyed with and slightly disappointed that it didn't. Vin was a lot more uneven. I got a kick of being disgusted with his advances similar to Warren and Elliot in the other games, but providing a worthwhile male relationship option a la True Colors would have also been welcome. And now on to things that I actively disliked. So first off, I'm going to start with the post-credits scene. My initial reaction was that I don't like Diamond having powers. It makes the world seem a bit too small. I feel like in this universe, metahumans should be more rare to make having powers feel special. That said, I have since went back and replayed Before the Storm anytime since I finished Double Exposure, and I do like the hints about Rachel Amber having fire powers. Maybe have a blind spot when it comes to Rachel, but more so I have a problem that Diamond's powers seem to just come out of nowhere. And there really weren't too many hints that she was special. The only thing I kind of noticed is that she experienced something weird while she was stuck in the time vortex, but that was about it. I'm also not crazy about the clear Professor X versus Magneto situation being set up for future sequels between Max and Safi. I get it that it's hard to find a superhero plotline that hasn't already been done to death, but assembling teams X-Men style feels like a bridge too far for the Life is Strange series. And that leads me into my next complaint. This game presented choices, but there were almost zero consequences. Out of all the Life is Strange games, Double Exposure had the strongest illusion of choosing. I assume the reason for this is that there is a planned sequel, so the game had to end in roughly the same place for all players to not create a divergence in player experience for the sequel. This is the exact reason most of these choose-your-own-adventure games are standalones or anthologies. The more you allow player choice to shape the narrative, the more difficult it gets to tell stories that span long time periods. The original Life is Strange is still the gold standard for the butterfly effect, with choices having major impacts on how the story plays out. Though, to be fair, Life is Strange did cheat a little bit by using time travel, since all the decisions throughout the game were wiped out and replaced with one major decision at the end. That said, there is still room to make player choice matter in minor ways. I know Deck 9 is capable of this. Before the Storm had many different ripple effects. even though the main story beats were pretty much the same, so I'm disappointed they couldn't do the same thing in Double Exposure. And finally, the biggest sin of this game is that it didn't make me cry. That's what I come to Life is Strange for, and this story just didn't cut it. Had I known there wouldn't be an emotional ending, I would have just let myself break down back in episode 1. Even then, what got me on the verge of ugly crying was mostly residual heartbreak over Chloe. The things unique to this game, like Safi's memorial and Yasmin's desperate text to Max, just got me a little choked up, but didn't quite get me there. And I really wanted to cry in this game, god damn it. So that said, how do I rank this game amongst the other Life is Strange games? Before the Storm is my current favorite, and that's not going to change. With that said, Before the Storm does have a bit of an unfair advantage leveraging Chloe's tragic backstory that they established in the original Life is Strange game. It didn't have to do the legwork of making us care about Chloe, because we already did, and that freed up screen time to pour all of the game's focus onto Rachel. This also made a tight 3-episode structure possible, which made it feel like every scene was driving the story forward and there wasn't much padding. It's also easy to look back fondly on the original Life is Strange because nostalgia clouds our judgment. But let's be honest, the writing in that game was spotty in places, downright bad in others, and super cringy at times. Now, you can chalk this up mostly to grown-ass French men trying to write teenage American girls. But Life is Strange did compensate for the spotty writing by going hard as fuck on the story. Apocalyptic overtones, mysteries out the ass, murder, suicide crisis negotiating, abducting vulnerable girls, grappling with the morality of euthanasia, and a thoughtful examination of the butterfly effect. This game packs a metric fuck ton of heavy topics into its 5-episode span. It would be an almost impossible task to get darker or crazier than the first game without feeling like a parody. So any follow-ups kind of have to be lower stakes and less exciting by default. As for the non-Arcadia Bay games, it's tough to compare because they are very different kinds of stories compared to the Max and Chloe saga. Life is Strange 2 is a classic road story, and True Colors is a much more personal exploration of emotion and empathy. As of now, Before the Storm is still my favorite, then the original Life is Strange, and I'm really not sure how to rank the remaining titles, Double Exposure included, but maybe with time I'll have a clearer idea of where I put them. Even though it's not my favorite, I did really enjoy playing this game, and I'm glad I recorded my first reaction so I can revisit it later. While some things were disappointing, the good outweighed the bad, and I'm looking forward to a second playthrough a little down the road so I can pick up on all the little things I miss. So that's my review of the game. If you stuck around this long, I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see my thought process as I went, you can also find my full blind playthrough of Double Exposure posted on my channel. So now that my review is finished, there's one last thing I wanted to save until the end. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Chloe. I went into this game completely blind, and I'm really glad I didn't look up a single thing about it until after I finished the game. In the beginning, I was actually assuming the Sacrifice Chloe ending is the canonical Bay decision. It feels pretty obvious that this is what Don't Nod intended, based on how much effort they put into the two different ending cutscenes. In the Sacrifice Chloe ending, you get a heartbreaking scene of Max having to sit in the bathroom, letting her best friend die, and then follow that up with Max at the lighthouse and Chloe's funeral, and it shows how Chloe's death affects all of the different characters throughout the game. Meanwhile, in the Sacrifice Arcadia Bay ending, you just get a lackluster shot of Max and Chloe driving through the destroyed wreckage of the town. So with that said, I didn't even realize my first conversation with Safi and the Snapping Turtle was to backfill my decisions in the original game. You know, whether or not Chloe and Max are romantic and whether or not Chloe died. I just thought, yeah, Chloe's dead. Do I want to be honest or do I want to be lie? And I chose honesty. As it turns out, my choice to say they were high school sweethearts and that Chloe died just happened to be the best way to shape the narrative to come. Reading Max's journal entries about Chloe absolutely destroyed me, and giving Max this backstory made future developments, from romance to Max's use for powers, much more meaningful. After I finished the game, I finally looked at some reviews and Reddit posts, and god damn, some people really hate this game. A vocal minority hate it just because Chloe isn't in the game, and I get it. Chloe's awesome. I love Chloe. I'm dressed like Chloe. Chloe's great. Her tragedy is what made me fall in love with the series in the first place. But there's already 2 amazing games starring Chloe. She doesn't need to be the focus of everything Arcadia Bay related. That's not even to mention how difficult it would be to include Chloe in a major way, given that she is dead for half of the existing player base. I feel like these people just kind of missed the point of the first game. Max and Chloe's relationship was never the endgame, it was just the tool used to hammer in the message. Life is Strange is about learning to accept loss. The entire game kept reinforcing this theme. It even eased the player into the idea of letting Chloe die by granting her last wish in the alternative timeline. Max's powers couldn't save Rachel, they couldn't save William, and they couldn't save Chloe. Not without a price. And there's always a price to pay. For fuck's sake, her name is literally Chloe Price. How much more on the nose can it get? Even if Max chose to save Chloe by sacrificing Arcadia Bay, there's no world in which they live happily ever after. Well, maybe if you consider a truly infinite multiverse, then maybe. But being realistic, I don't think so. Chloe lashed out and blamed everyone for William's death back when it was an accident. How do you think she'll feel after she found out that Max decided to let William die without even asking Chloe's opinion? Let alone letting Joyce die after Chloe explicitly told her not to? Even if Chloe does mature out of being a rebellious teenager, she's still traumatized. It's unreasonable to think that she wouldn't hold at least a little resentment against Max. And even if Chloe does manage to get to a healthy place where she can accept the loss in her life, Max will still have her own set of problems. The guilt of her decisions would absolutely eat Max alive, and she would always wonder whether a small part of Chloe hated her for what she did. For both of them to heal through their respective and shared trauma would take a miracle and a lifetime of therapy, with someone that specializes in supernatural moral dilemmas. So when you add in all of the everyday issues and hard work it takes to maintain a healthy relationship, it's just too much to be believable. With all that out of the way, I can completely understand why the Sacrifice Arcadia Bay people would be turned off by how Double Exposure handled Max and Chloe's time after Arcadia Bay. I replayed the first episode choosing the We Broke Up option, and to be honest, it was kinda shit. You get 2 to 3 lackluster journal entries and some texts. Honestly, I would be kinda pissed off too if that's what I got on my playthrough. It almost feels like they intended to make Sacrifice Chloe the canon ending, then got cold feet and half-assed the solution to make both endings work. But it just doesn't work. I'm not sure if Deck 9 or Square Enix is to blame for this and the other missteps, but if I had to guess, the blame for most of it lies at the greedy feet of Square Enix. With the multiverse concept being introduced in Double Exposure, I really wish they would have had the balls to commit to Sacrifice Chloe being the canon ending. Now, this is going to be a bit, forgive me while I indulge in some fanfic. If you want to tune out, I get it. But, imagine this. The game starts the same as normal. You get to choose whether Max and Chloe were in love or just friends. But you don't get to choose the next part. When Safi pries further, Max tearfully says that Chloe died her senior year. The rest of the game plays out with all the impact and heartbreak that I got to experience in my playthrough. Then episode 5 comes along. After Max decides to not shoot Safi, she wakes up in the North Quad. Seems like everything is fixed and normal at first. Safi is alive, Max is ecstatic, gives Safi a big hug, and Safi is a bit confused why Max is acting this way. They do a talk and walk over to the admin building, and as they talk, it becomes clear that something is off. Things aren't quite right. This isn't Max's original universe. Max finds a shift point and goes through it. Now she's in a completely different timeline. Max talks to Vin at his desk in front of Yasmin's office. Still seems normal. That is until Moses walks up and gives Vin a cheerful kiss hello. Clearly they're a couple. Then the door to Yasmin's office opens up and out walks President Lucas Colmenero. Max asks where Yasmin and Safi are, but everyone looks at Max like she's crazy. Yasmin and Safi never existed in this timeline. Max, freaking out, leaves and goes back out to the North Quad and hears a ghostly voice of Diamond calling out. Max uses her pulse ability to see Diamond in another timeline, absolutely terrified, staring up at 2 moons in the sky. So, trying to help her friend, Max finds another shift point and goes through again. Now, Max is at the Snapping Turtle, sitting at a table with Moses, Reggie, and Diamond. Back to normal finally? Maybe. Max gets up to talk to Amanda behind the bar, but Amanda is preoccupied talking to a woman with her back turned. A woman with unnaturally dyed hair. And when Max gets up to the bar, lo and behold, it's Chloe. Max is overwhelmed, gives Chloe a big hug or kiss, depending on your earlier friend/lover's decision, and Chloe responds with a confused, "Damn, Caulfield, you miss me that much when I leave for a few minutes to get drinks?" It becomes obvious this is a timeline where Max and Chloe were always together. Now, cue a lengthy scene where Chloe is also friends with all Max's new friends at Caledon. They reminisce about their adventures trekking across the country, etc. Everyone is normal and happy. In her inner monologue, Max acknowledges that this isn't the timeline she came from, but she is sorely tempted to stay here instead. As Max is spaced out, Chloe brings her back to Earth with a, "You still with us, Max?" "What?" says the startled Max. Chloe responds with, "I said," and then in an ominous tone, Chloe starts reciting Maya's book. Max is confused. Then Moses joins the recitation in unison, followed by Reggie and Diamond, as a look of horror dawns on Max's face. She starts to panic, and the entire bar erupts in chaos, people screaming and clutching their heads. Max didn't fix shit. And as much as it kills her to leave Chloe behind again, Max has to shift out of this universe. After that, the game proceeds as normal with Max on the North Quad with Diamond and the Two Moons. Everything else happens exactly the same, except maybe cut out the motel scene since that was a little meh. Now, I'm no writer. That was bad fanfic, whatever. And it's easy to play armchair quarterback, but wouldn't something like that be much better? It would give the Pricefield diehards a glimpse of the universe they chose, a universe where Max and Chloe did get their happily ever after, yet it would still reinforce that Max has to pay the price, pun intended, for letting Sophie live. I don't know. I feel like I'm just kind of rambling now, so I think I'll end it here. For the few people that stuck around this long, my next series is going to be Outer Wilds. I recorded it a few years ago, but for various reasons, I'm just getting around to editing it now. I'll either have the first episode out next week or I might post it after the Christmas break. Not entirely sure yet. But yeah, hopefully I'll see you around, and until then, bye everybody.